Fantastic. Well, good afternoon to all. This is one of our first in-person and online CPD events. Now, I would like to welcome extended welcome to our friends at Engineers New Zealand, IEEE and IET, as well as there are a few from Australia, I believe. So welcome. So firstly, before we get on to our presentations, there's a couple of housekeeping rules. So if you would like to ask questions, please do write these down in the chat, and we will address these at the end of the presentation. It'll make life a little bit easier, as this is run as a meeting rather than as a webinar. All things said, as Roger mentioned, it's recorded and will be available for people to revisit through the CIBSE website or the YouTube channel that CIBSE has. Right, let's move on to the presentation itself. So the presentation today is Mission Measurement, Is It Worth It? And will be presented by Mark. So Mark is also a Australian New Zealand chair for CIBSE and has been with CIBSE for many years. But he also works on commissioning, and that's his bread and butter. And yeah, so hopefully he's going to give some fantastic insights, no doubt, into what do we need to look for and what do we need to do to think about commissioning before the commissioning stage. So I'm going to hand over to Mark. So
okay, cool. Right, good evening, everyone. Thank you. So just before I get into my presentation, we've got a few general slides to go through. So just like to promote the 2022 seminar series that will follow on from last year's series, Survival of the Fittest, and examine the future trends in healthy building design and operation. This year there will be a particular focus on sustainable strategies that can be more widely applied. If we are going to make the greatest impact as an industry and stay within our planetary boundaries, we need to achieve design strategies, good strategies that can be applied to ordinary buildings. More than we need great strategies that can only be applied to a few extraordinary buildings. So that's going from great to good, hence the title. So in these good strategies in the 2022 ANZ seminar series, we will focus on going from great to good and explain what that means. Each week we'll explore a different life cycle stage of buildings and how we can work towards providing sustainable development while staying within our planetary boundaries. Confirmed speakers so far include Carlos Flores and Monique Alfres from Neighbours, Jorge Chapa from Green Building Council of Australia, Jessica Allen from ClimaSure. So feel free to click on the QR code for more information and registration. So that's later in the year. We have our annual Young Engineers Awards coming up very soon, just about a month away, so that's very exciting, in Sydney. So if anyone happens to be in Sydney or has friends in Sydney that feel that like to go along, it's going to be a great night. We're flying, as the first one we've had in 3 years, and we're flying out all of our finalists from the previous 2 years that were unfortunately unable to fly out, so we're making that up to them. So it'll have the finalists from this year, which the awards will be on, and the previous finalists and of course the winners from the previous 2 years. So it should be a fantastic event in the Parliament building in Sydney. Tickets are very reasonable. I can't remember, about $45 or something like that. And you get there'll be drinks and nibbles afterwards. It'll be a great night. So if you happen to be in Sydney, we'd really like to see you there. CIBSE, Chartered Institute of Building Service Engineers, based in our region, Australia, New Zealand, and our local Young Engineers Network are a group of volunteers, people who love the industry, want to put back into the industry, want to make a difference. So if you're a person of that nature and would feel like you'd like to do some more, then talk to your local committee chair or anyone on the local committee and express an interest to get involved. It's a fantastic opportunity to get to meet people, to get to talk about the industry with other like-minded people, share your interests, and actually try and drive industry changes. It's a great place to be, and it's been fantastic for me and my involvement in the CIBSE committee and with CIBSE, I really strongly recommend that you've got that passion, that desire to make a difference, and join one of the local committees and help make that change. Another big event that's coming up has been postponed for the last 3 years as well, Peter, that's right? Yeah. ARBS. So ARBS is the Air Conditioning Refrigeration Building Services Group, predominantly based in Australia, but is a very CIBSE a big supporter of them. They're a big supporter of CIBSE as well. As the big event is happening in August, from the 16th to the 18th of August, at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. So again, if you happen to be in the region or planning to go to Australia, it'd be a wonderful thing to attend. It'd be lovely to see you there. CIBSE has a store there, so if you do happen to be there, please do drop by and say hello. It'd be lovely to meet you. And finally, just like to acknowledge Connexus Recruitment for their support of CIBSE ANZ annual programme of technical events. Connexus is a boutique recruitment consultancy dedicated to ANZ's design and construction sector. With over a decade of combined experience in recruiting exclusively within the space, their consultants are amongst some of the best in the industry and are proud to have connected talented individuals from across the globe with some of Australia's most recognised consultancies. They are advocates for people and businesses in their journey to professional success, striving to bring back a consultative approach to the recruitment market. The key disciplines that they recruit for include building services, digital engineering, and project management. So we'd like to thank Connexus for their continued support of our presentations. Right, I think now I can get on to my presentation. Which is that the right slide? Do we need to change that?
Yeah. Which one is it? Is this one?
That one is a green. Go down to the green one. That's it. There we go. Right. So, are we ready? Right. Sorry about that. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. My name is Mark Crawford. I've been involved with commissioning and commissioning management of building services for 30 years now. I graduated 30 years ago, which is a bit of a shock actually when you start and work out the numbers. I did actually do some hands-on commissioning during my school years, in my later school years. My friend's father ran a commissioning company back in the UK, and we used to go out and spend a few weeks of our vacations earning a few backhanders and cash. But anyway, learned how not to commission then, as well as how to commission. But it was great fun for a young guy. And when I graduated, there was a bit of a downturn in the market. I'm an electrical engineer, electrical and electronic engineer by degree, and there was a very few companies that were taking on people degree leavers at that point. So my friend's father said, "Well, come and join us again. You know, you had fun before. Come and join us. We're looking for graduates." So that's how I got into commissioning back in 1992. I soon realised that having a degree education made me stand out in the world of commissioning, because there were very few that had tertiary education, and there was lots to learn. And I learned something every day, to be honest. So some 30 years later on, I'm still learning. But it was a great opportunity, and I found it really interesting. The diversity of the tasks in particular and the people you meet are very interesting. So one minute you're in a boardroom with the client discussing budgets for the next project and how the commissioning needs to be included in those budgets and processes. And next minute you might be on site in a plant room sweeping up water where a pipe's burst, and you have to try and help out, all hands to the pumps, as it were. And that diversity and everything in between just leads to a very exciting life. There's never a dull moment really with commissioning. I mean, there's some times when you're doing 12-hour generator tests, which might seem a bit tedious, but no, they're good fun as well. Just got to look at the positive side. So from that point, I set up on my own about 2 years after I started commissioning. I decided that I needed to earn some more money, so I went out on my own, spent 10 years running my own business in the UK, bumped into some Kiwi guy in London called Greg. We ended up setting up our own consultancy business in London. He he was originally working for a company called Becker, which I'm sure you all know. The Becker guys came over and we became part of Becker in the London office. And after a few years in London, I was asked to come over to Auckland to learn how systems are done the Becker way. So I moved my family over for a year, and 15 years later, I'm still here. Now, I left Becker about 3 years ago now, so I went out on my own. I decided that commissioning was where my passion lies, and it does. I love the field of commissioning or building services, and to be able to really spend my time and focus on that, I decided I'd go and set my own business up, and that's where MCL started, Mark Crawford Limited, just to keep it simple. And for the last 3 years, I've been working under that banner, but very recently, I've now teamed up with my partner, Martin Payne, who you may well know. He runs HVAC Solutions and ICM as well. So we're now Commissioning Management Limited, or CXM Limited for short. So all our new projects are being bid under CXM, and we've got several already underway and going. So I'll probably be running down MCL over the next year or two and building up CXM, and Martin's doing the same. So that's me in a nutshell. We want to leave a legacy. We're both very passionate about commissioning. We want to bring some young people in and train them up and have good people to do the commissioning management skills and the ICA skills when we decide to retire, which, all going well, should be with 10 years ideally. So that's why we've done it. We've done it. We felt that if we join forces, we have the resilience of working together, and gives us a better chance to take more people on and train them up and leave that legacy behind. So we've both been in the field for 30 years, have a reasonable amount of knowledge, but still learning, still got plenty to learn. So that's why we do it. And judging by the interest that I've seen since I've been on my own, there's a lot of interest in commissioning management and independent commissioning agent roles. There's new bids coming across the desk every week, and they're not at the moment solicited. They're just people phone me up or send me emails, and it's just a real interest. Most major projects, it seems, are interested in having some form of commissioning consultant on board, which is fantastic, because 15 years ago, commissioning management wasn't heard of. It's really only when Green Star started pushing the ICA requirements that it actually built its profile. And we'll come on to that now. So let's just, okay. So presentation, I'll just ramble on about commissioning, the good things and the bad things, and what to look for, and what happens and what should happen and what doesn't happen, and give you a good overview of commissioning management. The terms commissioning manager and ICA, independent commissioning agent, are used, and there are some confusions at times as to what the differences are. So I'll give my view of what the differences are. Hopefully they line up, but happy to discuss it later. What happens to a project if there is no focus on the commissioning? And as a commissioning manager, you can have a broad view of what's happening on the project, right across all of the services, into the structure, into the architecture, maybe into the civil design, and see how it all knits together. Often, if you're of a particular discipline, be a designer or a contractor, you're very focused on that discipline. And I feel that's probably where a lot of the problems arise, because there's so much integration that's necessary to build new projects. They're very complex, and we all need to work together. So I'll talk a bit more about that. When it's a good time to get someone like me involved in a job as a commissioning manager or an ICA, and then how that advice can be beneficial. And right at the end, just some numbers, throw some numbers out there, just because they're interesting really, and it might just raise an eyebrow or two. So in CIBSE, if you go to the CIBSE Commissioning Code M for management, there's a definition of commissioning management that's on the screen now. The planning, organisation, coordination and control of commissioning activities. Pretty obvious. ASHRAE have their own version, planned, collaborative and systematic process of review and testing conducted to confirm that a building and its subsystems perform as designed and as expected by the building occupants, which is a longer way of saying the first one. But I just like to think it's a quality assurance process for the services. It's what we're doing. We're just, first of all, checking that the systems can be commissioned. Then we're checking they're installed correctly so the commissioning can take place. And then we're verifying the commissioning has taken place, and then any interfaces and integration thereafter. And that's just ticking quality boxes as you go through and doing things in the correct order at the right time to the right level. And that's it, really. There's nothing more difficult than that. So that's it. That's my presentation over with. It's all done. No, just kidding. So what do we do? So commissioning manager, first of all. So a commissioning manager, the term commissioning manager has been around for longer than ICA role. So the commissioning management role encompasses all aspects of management of commissioning. Whereas the ICA is a term that came through Green Star, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. From a commissioning manager point of view, we'll check designs. We're eyes and ears of the client, hence the eyes and ears there. We review the installations. So once we've done the design review and pointed out there needs some more valves or some more test points or dampers in the wrong place, those sort of things, we then check the shop drawings have incorporated those requirements. And then as the installation takes place, we'll wander around site, check that they're actually being installed in the right way and valves are in the right way around. Commissioning valves, IR valves, for instance. If you go onto any site whilst they're being installed, they'll be probably close coupled to the next item because it's easier than cutting a short piece of pipe and fitting them with the necessary straight lengths of pipe that the manufacturer recommends. But on the floor, there'll be the box the valve came out of, and if you pick the box up, there'll be some instructions, and if you open those instructions, it shows a diagram of what the straight lengths of pipe should be. So quite often we'll go and we'll pick them up and we'll show them to the installer and go, there you go. They go, oh, I've never seen that before. Okay, well, there's boxes everywhere, look. They've all got them in. So these sort of things we pick up. Covers more than just the mechanical, covers the electrical installations, covers the controls. Controls, very, a lot can go wrong with controls, and if that's not working, then your building's never going to work. And we know, you guys in the room, you guys that listen, you're designing very complex buildings now. They have to perform very highly, and to get them to perform, there's a big reliance on the control system. So getting the control systems working correctly is key, and that's a real challenge. Once the systems are installed, there's some pre-commissioning tests such as pipework pressure tests, ductwork pressure tests, cable testing and the like, and point-to-point testing, which is one of the first things that doesn't get done particularly well on the control side because they'll rely on the software and the pre-com, the software to do the point-to-point testing of the cables. Well, it's always good to go out and get the installer, which is often not the control company, it'll be the E4M contractor, wherever they fit in, get them to check their cables are going to the right place or correctly identified, correctly terminated, and the like. So all it takes is 2 cables to be swapped and your system doesn't work. And following that, obviously the commissioning takes place after the pre-commissioning, and ideally if all the stages before that have taken place correctly, the commissioning should be a breeze. If you don't do those steps beforehand, then it's a real pain, as we all know. And then we all go back with our nice set of results, slot into the O&M manuals, which have all been prepared well in advance of practical completion, and handed over, and we do some training, and the client moves in. There's some big smiley faces everywhere because everything works, and there's a bit of a settling in period, as there will be with every building, and then you do your fine tuning to make it work with the users and the occupants. That's how it's supposed to work. I'm sure everybody else has got slightly different stories about how that hasn't quite happened, but we can all aim that direction. That's where we want to be. So some of the services that a commissioning manager will do. So design review, talked about that one. Integrated programming. So really interesting is forming the database for commissioning. So as a commissioning manager or an ICA, you say you've got this holistic view of the services and other disciplines as well. And you can build the database and how each of those services and items all link together in a logical fashion. So if you take a water system, for instance, so now the pipework needs to be installed, and the pipework needs to be pressure tested, and the pipework needs to be flushed and cleaned, and each of those takes time, and flushing and cleaning always takes longer than expected and doesn't get allowed for. Then obviously the pumps need to be set to run, so that needs electrical power into the VSDs from the switchboard. The controls guy needs to be involved to turn, pre-commission the VSDs, open up some of the valves and the like, so we can do the flushing. And then once all that's done, the commissioning guy comes along and he'll need to open up the valves and go around and set the IR valves up and take his readings, and then find the pressure set points to give back to the BMS guy, who will then come back and program his software and put the set points in so it all works. And that's just one stream of activities for one service. You add in all the different streams of activities, many of which are parallel paths, and they all have to converge at this practical completion date. Now, what I do commissioning integrated programming is I go through and I list all the tasks the way I see them in my head, link them together, and link them into discipline as well, and find out where the end date is, and then you put the durations in. And if the end date overshoots, you can either sort of adjust the times and the links to see if that can all work. But sometimes you might have to go back to the builder and say, it doesn't work at the moment. What can we do? As an example, if you're building multi-stories, builders are horizontal, layer by layer. Services tend to be vertical. They tend to have plant on the roof, which requires risers. You can't generally do the lower floors until the plant's on the roof. So it's a bit of a different way of thinking. But maybe, is there anything we can do to prepare those floors as they're being built before we get the roof on? And that helps compress the program, such as temporary flushing rigs. So if the pipework's in there, can we put a temporary flushing rig in, flush out that pipework, treat it, and maintain it whilst the other floors are being built? Now, there is a need to be very vigilant in how you maintain those, but it does actually help compress the program a bit. And areas like that. Getting switch rooms ready. You can't start anything until you got power onto the building, really, because the temporary power is minimal. So let's get the switch room ready so they can get the switch gear in and on, so we can start getting power around the site. So items like that become really important and stand out, and that's how we develop these programs. And often we'll find that the commissioning activities or the pre-commissioning activities start way earlier than what's expected. So when you sit down with the trades, the various mechanical, electrical, controls, plumbing, fire, and say, hey guys, just done this program, and you've all provided your input into that program with the durations. It means that you've actually got to start in a month's time. Now, you would probably thinking of starting in 3 or 4 months' time. So this is a different way of thinking here. So let's do them in the right order, so that we're not tripping over each other. They get done correctly once, minimises the repeats, minimises the clashes. Everyone happy, they're focused, they just move through the program, get to the end, and it all is a success. So that's a great tool, to be honest, and undervalued. I mean, I often spend many hours putting these together, and someone says they're great, and it just goes into the drawer and never gets looked at again. So using it is the key, and updating it and using the information on there to track progress. Other ways of tracking progress, you can just see there's sort of an Excel spreadsheet type approach, which is just a database of all the different services and all the different plant that gets tracked through its various stages of commissioning. Becomes a very important tool, particularly for reporting, putting on the table during the monthly reports or 2 weekly reports. Very good, very easy way of seeing where things are. Easy to color code with the traffic light system. Anything that's doing well is green, orange is a problem, red is a real problem, needs to be focused on. So it helps to focus the mind. I've talked about installation inspection, system witnessing. So system witnessing, some people see that as an additional service. I'm not so sure. I feel that if you've installed a system and commissioned it, you should be more than happy to demonstrate to somebody that it's been commissioned correctly. We would generally look at maybe 10 to 20% of the systems, or of each system, certainly the major systems, and we'll do spot checks just to see that the results that have been issued can be replicated, and we say, well, we've looked at that one, that's the same as what we've written down, we'll accept that as a representation for the system. So that's good. Quite often we go there, look at item 1, doesn't work, item 2 doesn't work, item 3 doesn't work, right, guys, have another go. Okay, but that need to witness helps keep people keen, keeps them focused, makes them realise they can't just write things down and walk away. And I worked as a hands-on guy for a few years in my early career, and I know what people do and what you can do, and it's quite scary what has been done. When I was a young ladder carrier back in the day, and my engineer was doing stuff that I had to turn away from because it just wasn't right. But I know it happens, so won't go there. Ask me later. Scenario testing and IST, integrated systems testing. So everyone commissions their own systems. They also check that the interfaces are connected and apparently doing the right thing. But then the integrated systems test is, well, let's just prove not just from A to B, but from A to B to C to D to E. So everything in that line, that chain, is all working. And we'll go through and just check. And that's just making sure that the interfaces are talking correctly, the responses are correct. Very important to check that the building is actually doing what it's supposed to do, rather than just standalone discipline-based systems. And the key there is people need to work together. And again, I think people tend to be siloed into their discipline, and everyone seems to think the interfaces are done by someone else. It's always someone else does that. I don't do that, but everyone says that. Everyone says, well, he's doing that. No one needs to know you're doing that. It doesn't get done. So really focusing on the interfaces, because that's where the problems will materialize. And then scenario testing is trying to break the system. Now that's more when you've got mission critical systems, such as a data center or a hospital, where you've got standby systems. So let's get it running. Let's turn off one of those devices, and let's see the standby device come on and take over, and the alarms come up, and ideally the conditions remain within the correct tolerances and the like. Let's turn the power off. Let's make sure the generator start up and everything switches over. All of those sort of tests. Again, if you involve the client and their facilities team at that point, they get this amazing confidence in how their building is working and how it works. That, you know, when you need to reset, that button on the switchboard that says reset actually turns it all back on again. And that's a true story. And I've been there when the building completely shut down, and they called the guy up and said, have you not pushed the button on the panel then? And this is a huge building in Auckland, and there was a button on the panel which turned it all back on again. There, they didn't know that 6 years later on. But it happens. The reporting we talked about, O&M reviews. O&M reviews, why can't O&M manuals be issued really early on in the job? The only things that can't be issued are mission results and as-built drawings. All the other stuff, once the orders have been placed, the submissions have signed off, put it in the O&M, it's done then. It's easy. Just fill in the commissioning results as they come in. It makes life a lot easier. And then you've got them for the training and the handover. It's like trying to, if you go and buy a brand new car and they say, we've got this manual, but we're not giving it to you yet. You've got to drive it around for 3 months and see how you get on, and then we'll give you the manual. And buildings are far more complex than cars, so it's amazing. It's amazing how the process works at the moment. Certainly improvement could be made there. Soft landings. That takes commissioning another stage, really. It covers all the bits I've talked about, so the involvement from very early on right through until handover, and then it extends it after handover, often 2 to 3 years after handover. And that's a really nice, that's the soft landing. You're there with the client in his on their initial journey in the building and how it works. The people that have been involved with the commissioning and the design are there, so if there's questions, they can be answered. If you need to know where the reset button is, somebody will know where to go, those sort of things. And it's a lovely process. It's a nice soft handover. Relatively inexpensive. They don't need to be there all the time, but it needs to be a regular meeting. Probably the first month, 2-3 months, there's a full-time involvement of the key people, and then it starts to drop down to maybe once a month, once every 3 months or 6 months or so during the first few years, just to hear the feedback from the users, assist with fine-tuning, so look at the energy usage and find out how that can be fine-tuned. Neighbours can be involved with that, for instance. And keeping that building working at its optimum, which is where we want to be, really. And often clients will come around and say, well, that room, not one we're in now, that's going to become a server room now, so what do we need to do? Do we have to change that VAV box or not, sort of thing? So having that input with the people who understand the building is really useful. So that's soft landings. And Educated clients are now asking for soft landings, or certainly parts of soft landings. It varies, but it's a good way. If the industry continues down that path, that's good from my point of view. Client training, I talked about that. Very important to get the guys on early on, show them how their building works. Otherwise, they're flying blind. I spent many months commissioning a building in Docklands in London, got it all working. The FM team turned up. They didn't understand the BMS. I got complaints that something wasn't warm or cold, or wasn't very happy. Went in there, took the ceiling tiles out. The actuator had been removed off the VAV box, and someone had put a damper handle on it and fixed it in place. I said, well, what's going on there? They went, no, we couldn't work the BMS. That's a silly thing. We just did it the way we know. Ah, okay. Right. So maybe not like that now. I mean, that was 20 odd years ago, but yeah, there's still a lot to be a lot of information to pass over to the FMT and the ops team, and helping them with their continuing commissioning moving on, so we can maintain that quality and efficiency for the building. The ICA, excuse you 1 second. Term that came through from Green Star, and I'm really pleased that it did, because it really gave me the profile of commissioning management a real leg up into the industry. Suddenly people are saying, what is an independent commissioning agent? And I say, well, that's what I do. Oh, great. Okay. So that's it really helped from my point of view. And there's several other people in the industry that are also providing a similar service, and it's great. It's a really good thing. Now, you're all familiar with the Green Star approach, and you're familiar that there's points that can be awarded for engaging in an ICA to perform commissioning management role. Now, it might be limited to nominated systems, and it certainly was in the earlier days. So it'd be anything that was an energy using system. So the chilled water system, your lighting control system, things like that. They weren't that interested in your generator controls or electrical distribution and the like. So this is where I feel the difference between an ICA and a commissioning manager sits, is that the commissioning management encompasses the whole of the building services, where the ICA did focus on certain aspects of the services, the ones that made a difference from an energy point of view. However, I'm starting to feel that that's changing now, and I think the two are actually overlapping virtually completely now, and the terms can be independently used as they mean the same thing. So if anyone was interested, that's where I think it has come from, and where it's going, that they're pretty much the same now. So just a quick description. You can all read that. I think it's pretty much what I've been talking about, but somebody who's independent provides commissioning management style role for the Green Star in particular, but it's expanding and taking on board a lot more than that. Not the greatest slide, I'm afraid, but you've probably all seen this curve before. When's a good time to employ a commissioning manager or an ICA? Well, the earlier the better. The earlier, you can see with the green line, the chances of change is high. We've got a lot of opportunity to make changes, and the cost of those changes on the orangey line is low. The further down the development, the project timescale goes, the harder it becomes to make changes, and the more costly those changes become. So if you're sitting around a table with a piece of paper or a Revit model now, and you point out that it would be a lot better if you change the ductwork configuration, put some extra dampers in, move the valves around and regroup them so it's easy to get to from one access hatch rather than having 10 access hatches that won't go in. Those sort of things can be done easy and won't actually cost hardly anything other than a bit of time. Once you're on site and the architect turns around and says, there's no way you're putting access hatches in that ceiling. And you go, well, I've got all these dampers to get to. They go, well, that's your tough luck. Okay, so what do? Do we guess what they should be set to, and then when the ceiling goes up, it's doing what it's doing, or do we leave a small child up there to adjust them when we need to? Or There's various options, but I mean, obviously trying to do it earlier is the key. Okay. We'll just leave that up there for a bit. So, very interesting stuff. We spend a lot of time in buildings. We're in a building now. I guess most of you guys online are in a building as well. Might be sat outside the library, I suppose. Yeah. Possibly, but more likely to be in a building. So we spend 90% of our lives in buildings. Someone's worked out, which is ridiculous, to be honest. So we should make the buildings nice places to be, safe places to be, comfortable places to be, places that are not going to affect your performance in any way. And this is what, as designers, you all aim for. Let's convert those designs into reality by going through the process and delivering good quality buildings. By doing that, you're actually going to cut down in the energy use that's is likely to be if you don't commission them correctly. So the general feeling, and there's some other facts around this, but if you go into pretty much any building that's been operating for anything more than a couple of years, if it's brand new and it's been commissioned, you're probably okay. But if it hasn't been commissioned correctly or it's been operating for a few years, you could probably reduce your energy consumption in that building by 30 to 40% fairly easily. 30% is low-hanging fruit. It's fixing simultaneous heating and cooling issues. It's fixing sensors in the wrong place that are being influenced by photocopiers that are driving your VAV plant down to minimums and creating extra energy use. It's having areas that are running air conditioning when they're not occupied and the like. So real simple, low-hanging fruit stuff. 30% easy. And next 10%, by maybe changing your strategies of the plant, you might get that extra 10%. So 30 to 40% savings in energy by looking at a well-commissioned building. That's enormous. Now, if every building did that, you can imagine how happy the government will be in terms of hitting multiple targets. So that's why I feel commissioning is pretty important. So pretty much covered these, but system's not functioning correctly. So what happens if we don't commission well? They don't work properly. They really don't work properly. And it can be as simple as two rooms, the sensors wired, that sensor there and the one on the other side of the wall, go back to the same control box and someone's got the terminals the wrong way around. So this sensor's looking at that room, that sensor's looking at this room, and therefore no one's ever happy. And it's as simple as that. But it can grow from there to being real heating and cooling simultaneously, which is just two systems fighting each other continually because they've not been set up correctly. And that's just an enormous waste of energy. Waste of energy is a cost as well, so people that are paying the bills will be pretty interested to hear about those sort of things. So how do we reduce the energy, reduce the costs? And at the same time, system failures. So if you've got a pump that's running flat out 50 hertz, or a fan that's now running way above 50 hertz as the systems allow them to now with the VSDs. It doesn't need to because the system's not been commissioned correctly, but it's easy just to ramp the bloody fan up and just let it get on with it. That's going to not last as long as a well-commissioned system, well-commissioned bit of plant. Therefore, it's going to be replaced more often. Therefore, there's more costs. Therefore, the OPEX values of the building goes up, and it's a rolling on domino effect. Obviously, dissatisfied building occupants. I think there's a slide further on talks about productivity and the like. It's very difficult to measure productivity, but if people are happy and comfortable, then they like to focus a lot more, get more done. So from a management point of view, having people that are comfortable is a good thing. Unreliable monitoring systems. So again, that's one of the key points I'll keep coming back to. The users rely on the BMS systems to manage their buildings. If it's not working properly or the information is wrong, then the corrections that they will be doing to maintain the building will also be wrong. It's really key to get that information correct. So just a mantra that I repeat whenever I get the opportunity is that there's a lot of expense, a lot of cost involved in First of all, selecting a design team and getting the design done, and then going out to tender, and then engaging a contractor and all the subcontractors, installing all the systems to a point where it gets handed over. There's a huge amount of investment into that point. That last little bit, which is let's commission it correctly, is quite a small amount as a percentage, a couple of percent probably of the overall costs. But that couple of percent, if you don't spend it, you end up all those things on that previous slide, the building not working correctly, extra energy use, etc., etc. So why not commission it correctly? So flushing of pipework systems, I know I touched upon it earlier. If you don't do it, your pipework systems, which are a way of moving, it's a medium for moving the heating and cooling around your building as efficiently as possible, can get a bit blocked up. And if you get it blocked up and they don't look after it properly, you can end up with things like that. Now that's a strainer basket. And now you can see HVAC Solutions, so that's Martin's hands-on company. He provided these photos for me. So they're out of a building, I think they're in Auckland, certainly in New Zealand. That's a strainer basket. I don't think that's going to be doing an awful lot. There's another one. So this is it's quite a big strainer basket there. So that's a big pump. It's a big chill water system, I imagine. And people will be moaning why they're feeling a bit warm. That's not atypical. So when we do flushing, there's a variety of, I can't see them all now because of that, but there's different stages that when you go through the various flushing processes. So there's the initial flush, then there's the chemical clean, then there's a post flush, then there's all the back flushing, and then the inhibitor goes in. So you start off with really nasty, horrible brown. There's a black one there that you might not be able to see, and then you slowly get down to a point where it actually looks quite nice, almost drinkable. Ah, there's the one. Right. So yes. So that will be probably after the initial flush. So that's without any chemicals in. So that's what the water looks like in most systems. Horrible, chocolatey brown. Clean it out, flush it till you get to a raw water. Then we add the chemicals, which scour the inside of the pipes, take off the welding slag and all the mildew and what have you. And it turns into that, which is all the yuck and iron that's coming off the pipes. Flush it out again, and then you put your inhibitor chemicals in, you get nice clean water. I wouldn't drink it, but it looks like it could be. So very visual indication of why we do commissioning properly. And this is just pre-commission. Now, for those with electrical bias, I also have something similar. Now, these are cables from a transformer in a big building in Auckland for a major client that didn't realise that the transformers belonged to them, therefore they didn't maintain them. And the electrical company, which would have been Vector, said, well, we're not maintaining them because they don't belong to us, they're yours. Oh. And so for several years, these cables were not done up properly on their transformers. And it created a high resistance joint. They got very warm and the bolts melted, the cables melted. And it was only found out when I did an upgrade on the generator controls and made the generator controls work. And all of a sudden the generator started jumping on, running for 30 minutes and then stopping. And I was out walking in the middle of nowhere, got a call from the client. Why do my generators keep starting and stopping? I don't know. It's a bit odd. So they found these. So what's happening is when the cables heated up, they moved as they heated up, and as they moved, they separated from the terminals on the transformer. The control system went, oh, I've lost my volts. I'll start my generators up. Start the generators up, switch over the generators, the cables would cool down, go back onto the bars, the volts will come back again. The generator control go, I've got my mains back. If that's okay there for another 10 minutes, I'll go back to mains. Yep, go back to mains. Cables have then got load on them, they'd warm up, and they'd move again, and the process continued. But this was very, very close to burning the whole building down because, I'll show you some more. There you go, there's the terminals, and then they've actually welded the bolts. That's how hot must that have got? That one on the left there is what it should have looked like. So quite a difference. So that's through bad QA systems. Somebody has used the wrong bolts, they've used the wrong washers, they haven't tightened them up properly, no one's checked it. They've probably hand tightened them up. Oh, it's smoko time, and off they go, come back, where were they? Oh, they're done, let's move on to the next one. And it's as simple as that. and it happens. So good QA procedures, good pre-commissioning and testing procedures, and that's something that commissioning manager or an ICA will check for. So this sort of thing shouldn't happen. Okay, duct leakage. It's a good thermal image of duct leakage. Duct leakage, right. The rules changed a wee while ago that you only had to do duct leakage testing on systems over 1,000 pascals. And in most buildings, they don't go above 1,000 pascals. So therefore, you don't do duct leakage anymore. Manufacturers, whether they knew it or not, were therefore checking out pieces of duct from the factory that weren't sealed properly. And then the installers didn't seal them properly, so more leaks. When you test it, you'll find it's leaking all the way the longitudinal seams, all the way around the flanges, out of all the joints. The clips are not in place properly, so it's leaking out of those. So it's just poor installation, poor manufacturing, poor installation. So now, please just ask to do some random checks, duct test on all the systems. Doesn't matter how big or small it is. We're finding that you're probably putting in something like 20% more air in to get the right amount of air out. And that 20% is a lot of energy. A lot of energy that goes somewhere, but not where you want it to go. Normally conditioned air as well. So duct leakage tests really important at the moment. Martin and I are working down in Taranaki. We said we're going to come down and do some duct leakage tests. I went, okay, yeah. And so get the manufacturer there. I said, oh yeah, the manufacturer's here. You find something wrong with my duct, I'll be surprised. And we tested it and he went, what? He was shocked. Honestly, he almost fell over. So there you go. That's what we're finding. He said, I don't understand. Now you know, please do something about it. Massive. Calcs there. There we go, some calcs. So if you're running a fan at 40 hertz, roughly 2.1 kilowatts, so they have to run it at 48 because you're chucking out lots of extra air into places you don't know where it's going. You're now going up to 3.5 kilowatts, 69% increase in energy to provide the same amount of air. Yep, times that by 24/7 in some systems, and that's a huge amount per year, right? And that's only on a 12 by 5. You're saving quite a bit per system. That's not a big system. A 3 kilowatt motor is fairly small. There'll be lots of those in the building. So now I want to be a little bit controversial. Might upset a few people, but might ring some bells. So what's a typical approach for commissioning? Projects that I've seen in New Zealand, I've had less experience in Australia, but plenty in the UK, plenty here, some in Asia as well. When do you do your commissioning? Well, it's that bit at the end, isn't it? It's that bit at the end when everyone else is finished. Well, what's that then? Well, you know, that bit, that's all. Maybe the day before we give the keys over. Whenever, just that bit. Oh, no, but I actually need to start commissioning 3 months ago. Well, you can't. We're not ready for you. Well, handing the building over is the project. It's got to be commissioned and working. No, we've got to get the walls up, get them painted, carpets down, job's done. There's the keys. If you need to commission it, come back in after practical completion. You've got 12 months to commission it. What's your problem? Does that sound familiar? Yeah. People don't appreciate the commissioning. That's why they've got that attitude. And some of those things that I've shown you before really highlight why commissioning needs to be brought up the ranks a bit and understood and appreciated. Contractors get away with not commissioning thoroughly because nobody checks on what they're doing. Unfortunate, but at the end of the day, everyone's under pressure. At that point of the project, most people have run out of funds. They've got another job that started. They really don't want to be there. It's good enough until someone moans, we'll leave it as it is. No one's checked it, we're good. Horrible thing to say, and when I talk to most contractors, they know it happens, they don't like it, and they'd rather do it properly, but what can they do? So we can all help to try and change that by raising the profile of commissioning and starting at the right time and making sure buildings don't get handed over unless it's done properly. How many times have I been given O&M manuals of the commissioning results? Here's commissioning results as a designer when I was my previous life, and you go through them, you think, well, there's nothing in these results. They're just blank sheets, information not included, missing. You go, well, what happened here? Oh, well, that's what's been in there from day one. And basically, the systems haven't been commissioned, but someone's filled in the sheets with the titles on and provided blank sheets because they haven't got around to commissioning it. Or you see things like 10% as a flow. That's the final test sheet that's gone in. Okay, let's go and have a look. Oh, well, there's a fan coil unit there. That's the one that's only doing 10%. Wonder why? Oh, it's not switched on. Oh, it's not wired up. That's why it's only doing 10%, because it's got the fresh air going in one end, and that's all that's coming out the other end. But that's how it's been left. Amazing. So, obviously, money is everything in construction. People bid very low to win the jobs, and as soon as they've won it, it's all about how do we save money. The last one, last cab off the rank, the commissioning cab. Yeah, well, don't need you. We don't need a cab. We can get away with a wheelbarrow or something like that, something cheap. Don't need the cab, and it's just overlooked. It's not important. Level of skill in the industry is varied. Certainly when you get out into the regions, it tends to be a bit more varied. Some are very good, particularly ones that have got an industrial focus. A lot of industrial focused contractors, they seem to be pretty good at the commissioning process. They understand it. But sometimes you go out to places where the contractors are mainly residential builders. So when you suddenly build a large commercial office or a hospital or whatever in a regional area, and your contractors are mainly residential type contractors, their appreciation of commissioning and the skill is not where it needs to be. So unfortunately, but sometimes that's true. And we talked about completing the commissioning during the defect liability period. Yes, I'm sure that all sounds familiar. What do we need to do? Well, we need to certainly improve the importance of commissioning and where it sits. Have somebody who's focused on the commissioning, such as commissioning manager, an ICA. And as I said right at the beginning, that seems to be the case. People are beginning to realise there is a role that's necessary, which is great. Allow time for commissioning. Understanding what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how that integrates in with the construction program, and not letting the bricks and sticks guys just steamroller the services guys out the way, because this is the way we've always done it. That's a big change. It's a big change. They're trying to hand over a room like this. You've got the ceiling tiles down because you've got to get up there. You don't want the desks in there because you're going to put your ladders up. And they're going to come in and they're going to put the ceiling tiles in. They're going to put the carpet down. They're going to put the desks in. There's going to be computers on the desks, and they go, now go and commission it. And you go, well, I can't work there now because all the stuff that's in there. Oh, you're just fussy. You're just fussy. You're always moaning. You commissioning guys always moaning. Why can't you just do it? It's just a problem. Right, okay. Changing that attitude. Using the right people. There are the right people around. I know they're very busy. I would love to find some other ones that would be keen to be trained up and learn the skills, which is my challenge for the next 10 years, but the industry's challenge right now. We need to find the right people that can do this. And finally, clients shouldn't accept their building until they know it's been commissioned. They do not want people commissioning it in their first 12 months. It's got to be working. They can fine tune it, that's different, but actually commissioning it, it's not commissioned before handover, it will never be commissioned properly because you can't get to where you need to get to because of the occupants, the users. So let's, as a client, or if you represent clients or can influence clients, try and get them to not accept their buildings until they know it's been commissioned. And that's a very simple way of changing the industry. I've struggled to influence that in 15 years here. So it's a challenge because at the end of the day, contracts and practical completions and contractors, they're very, very good at convincing people to accept buildings and take the key. So it takes a strong-willed client that's been banging the drum all the way through that process so that when you do get to the end, they say, no, we've been telling you for the last 18 months, it's not going to be accepted until it's ready. Go away and do it again. Go away and finish what you're supposed to do. Rather than, okay, we don't want to pay any extensions or any more P's and G's, and okay, we'll take it as it is and we'll just manage it, which is not the right way. Right. So, why is it important? Come down to total quality approach from everybody, and you get such a better feeling when you do the job well, and you do it well once, and then you walk away and go, that's good, that's working, I've done my job, I can move on. As opposed to you try and do it and then you can't because something's in the way or someone else is in the room, and then you have to go back and you have to come back again and you have to set your gear up and you get started and then someone turns the power off because they're doing generator tests when you're trying to commission, or vice versa. And everyone gets frustrated that they can't do their job. So let's do it properly, a quality approach. Let's provide the buildings that our clients are expecting. As I was saying, well-commissioned buildings shouldn't have to shout over the air conditioning. Thanks, Riders. That's all right. We're nearly finished. The soft landing's a great handover, a great experience. Be with your clients in that first early periods of occupancy. That's what they remember. They don't remember the last 18 months of hell that you've gone through to get their building ready. They remember that first couple of months that they move in. Be with them, hold their hands, give them good advice and guidance, show them how to work their building. When things go wrong, and they will go wrong, someone's there to fix it. It's not a drama. That is how you get remembered, and that's how they come back and say, bloody hell, that was a nice experience, as opposed to, oh, won't use those again. No, that was awful experience. And ultimately, if we do all that, we're going to save money, because we're going to save energy, which is a great outcome. Okay, these are the what's it going to cost? Right, global studies have shown that provide a full commissioning management service 0.5 to 1%. 0.5 to 1%. Global studies. That's not New Zealand. It doesn't work in New Zealand. New Zealand, I'm saying, is probably somewhere between 0.05 and 0.15%. Maybe 0.2 if it's a very complex job or a small complex job as a percentage of the capex. But 0.5 to 1%, if you're in America and maybe Europe, you could justify commissioning management team, that sort of value. So it's not a lot of money, really, is it? Even at those values. So that is 100 to 200,000 for a 20 million build. 20 million build is a small building nowadays. You looked at a $200 million build, which is a reasonable sized job. You're looking at 1 to 2 million, I think. Yes, is that right? Now, no one will pay 1 to 2 million for an ICA or a commissioning manager. They just think, no, that's just a ridiculous amount of money. Okay, yeah, but I've got 3 guys working on that job for 2 or 3 years. That's not a lot of money over that period. Not full time necessarily. In the UK, I have a team of 3 guys working full time for 2 years on one project as a commissioning manager, and that's big money, but people paid it because they got the benefits out of it. But anyway, that's a sort of money, well, slightly less than that, I would say, for New Zealand, as it says there. Designers, I know, but for a similar project, you're looking at sort of 2 to 3 million fee for the design team. We're looking at 1 to 200,000 for the commissioning manager. I would say that's good value. I'm slightly biased, admittedly. I'd say it's good value. And in fact, I'm looking at that, I might put my rates up. But anyway, it's an interesting look at the numbers there. I don't know what you feel. Payback. So based on energy savings, ASHRAE did a big study, probably more than 10 years ago now, actually, but they were looking at 3 to 5 year payback for the commissioning management fee just on energy savings, which I think on its own is pretty good, to be honest. If you go into an existing building and help with recommissioning, that's a lot lower because there's those 30 to 40% savings that you can make straight away. Now, this is a great fact, just to get things into perspective. Typical office building, if you add up the salaries of the people that work in that building, they add up to more than the cost of the building in the first year. So it's the people that cost money. The buildings are really quite a small amount of an operational cost of a large company. People. Therefore, you need to keep the people happy so their productivity is high. So therefore, you get good return out of them. Somebody sat and worked this out, which I think is great. Somebody spent 15 minutes a week moaning that they're not very happy because their air conditioning is not working. You can cover the cost of a commissioning manager in 6 months. Isn't that fantastic? I don't know, I can't ratify that, but I like it. I think that's great. Now everyone must moan for 15 minutes a week at least on the condition of their building. The amount of times I see people up on chairs taping bits of paper across their grills because they're getting a draft down their neck and things like that. So there you go. I think that'll do for now. There is another slide, but it's quite difficult to read, so I won't talk too much about that. But this is a project I'm working on at the hospital in Auckland, and we did some reviews about what the cost risks are from poor commissioning to good commissioning. So if you employ somebody who's not going to provide a good commissioning, your risks profile is really high, your risk costs are really high. And you look at the investment in commissioning and how that reduces the overall cost risk that could happen on a project to several millions instead of tens of millions. Quite a complex slide that. I'm not going to go into it now, but what I will do is say, has anyone got any questions? And I think that finishes my presentation for now. That's about an hour. Yeah, that's not too bad. Any questions online? Any questions in the room?
Question.
Go on, Peter.
Are there any standards for actual commissioning personnel in New Zealand?
Well, the only one, the ones I know of, you're talking about hands-on commissioning?
Yeah.
So
well, commissioning and
management.
Their management.
So in the UK, there's the Commissioning Specialists Association, the CSA. They regulate and train engineers, commissioning engineers, and there's different grades to demonstrate where you sit on your progression through your career. Currently, grade 6 is a commissioning manager, and you have to be within the commissioning field for 10 years before you can get to grade 6. They're now actually going through redefining that, and there's going to be 3 grades of management, which I need to go through and resubmit my application to get the top one. I hope after 30 years, I thought we should get there. But coming at level 0, you're a ladder carrier. You're fresh into it. You're carrying your hood around for your engineer ladder carrier, and then you sit and do training. Some of the training's desktop training. Some of it's actually on-site training. Some of it you sit down and do exams. Sometimes you write papers. But you progress through those 0, 1 to 5, and 5 is the top for hands-on. So that's a sort of senior technical commissioning engineer, and then 6 is the management. So in this country, there's probably a handful of people that are registered with the CSA, and there's only 3 grade 6 commissioning managers that I'm aware of. Me, Martin, and Sean, I think, on the. So that's the only 3 I know that are actually have got the grade 6 commissioning management grade in the CSA. When you look at most specs, and the specs will say you will apply with CIBSE commissioning codes, including A, B, L, M, W, R, and W, M management, and then under commissioning code M, it says your commissioning managers must be a grade 6 of the CSA. So technically, it should only be 3 people working in that role, but that's not the case because it's very difficult to try and enforce that here, which is understandable. NEB is obviously another one which provides good training for commissioning technicians as well. That's an American-based one, so that's a good system as well. But they're really the 2 that I'm aware of, hands-on. As for commissioning management, there is a commissioning. The CSA do a commissioning management course, and you actually go and sit in a classroom and learn that over 2 days, I think, in London. I think you might be able to do it online as well. Martin's done that one. He said it was very good. Does that help?
Yeah, but in Australia, it's been predominantly NEB throughout the whole country, and NEB just sort of closed the Australian branch. So there's a new called TACA.
Very cool.
TACA, Testing and Commissioning.
TACA. Oh, okay.
That's where that's it.
They're a training authority on commissioning, right?
They'll take care of it. They'll pretty much replace everything that NEB was doing. So
Okay.
NEB all went back. They had an Australian chapter. Everything was back to the US.
Mm.
They pretty much dissolved Australia and Ireland together. So the remnants of that, which is still the strongest Australian we're now forming TACA.
Okay, I'll look into that. It's good, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah. So any questions online? If you have any, please type it into the chat.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. Does anyone disagree with what I've said? I'm quite happy to have conflicting discussions. Oh, no, good, right. It's all true.
It's all true. Yeah.
Well, I really hope that everyone enjoyed that. I know I just stood here and waffled for an hour. There's a question.
So
Your sampling rates functional testing. Sampling rates functional testing. Is that the witnessing of the functional testing? Is that what's meant there? Yes, witnessing. Okay, so the way I look at this, it's all about confidence. You need to gain confidence that the contractor has done their job properly. Now, the way I start off, I do tend to look at quite a large sample until I've got the confidence that what the results that have been provided in advance can be repeated. Now, whether that's mechanical, air, water, electrical controls, you take the results, you say, yeah, I'd like to see this one, this one, this one, this one. And before long, you'll get a good feeling as to whether the commissioning has been done correctly. And once you get that feeling, I've got that confidence to say, right, I believe this is a correct set of results. I believe whatever I look at is going to be pretty close to what you've got written down here. The results are acceptable written down. So we'll take that as read, sign off the system to say it's been witnessed as read. If you go along and you start finding there's quite a few differences to what's been written down, I do tend to persevere for a little bit because sometimes there's just the odd bit, odd grill or the odd valve that's not quite right, or something's changed. The control system's been played with and it's altered the dynamic of the system. So spend a little bit of time initially, but again, quite often it becomes obvious that the commissioning hasn't been done correctly. I then walk away and say, do it again and call me back. If I come back the second time and it's the same state, then I'll start charging for my time thereafter. Normally it's done by then though. But, mission critical system.
Mark, there is a question from Alan Barclay.
Yeah, I'm just replying to Greg at the moment. I'll go back to Adam in a second. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry. Yes, I didn't. Yeah. Okay. So mission critical or life safety systems, I do tend to try and look at 100% of those. So fire alarm systems, often the fire alarm contractor say we only need to look at 20%. I say, well, actually, you need to test 100% of your system. And every year you test 20% and a different 20%, so that every 5 years you've tested the whole system again. But it has to be tested fully at handover. I go, no, we only need to test 20%. No, that's not true. So I often will say, well, I'll tell you what, let's witness everything. I go, well, it won't take long because you've got to go through it anyway. I'll just walk behind you. And I find that something like 1 to 2% of the actual detectors that are installed aren't working. So if you're in the office and it's one of those that's not working, you're going to be pretty upset if there's a fire. So I find that's a good thing to do. I like to test all of the interfaces as well, because they, again, as I mentioned earlier, interfaces is where it all goes wrong. So let's test the interfaces. Did a hospital down country for the second time. I was told it was all done. It'd all been tested the day before. I went down there over Easter, got there on Easter Monday because it was any day we could test it. It's all been done. First test failed. Second test failed. And that went through the whole, pretty much every line there was something not right. So I'd say, right, okay, we're only here today. Let's fix it. Let's test it. At the end of the day, we walked away and it was working. But it wouldn't have been if we hadn't checked it. So that's the way I go. It's about getting confidence. Greg, once you're working with the same guys and you've done 2 or 3 systems and you really believe that they're not going to let you down and they are doing their job properly, then that sample level can reduce. You might just go and do a quick spot check of 1 or 2 and go, yeah, that's fine. It's just getting that confidence, really. Because at the end of the day, you need to stand up and say, I'm confident the building is commissioned. So that's it to answer that one. I hope that has. And Adam, do you ever revisit jobs several years later and run into any common issues around 4-pipe? Yeah, yeah. 4-pipe chiller. They're really complex. They are complex from a number of reasons. They look great on paper. They look great from an energy saving point of view. But often to get the the right conditions so that you do get the energy saving, it's probably only a small percentage of the actual operating hours. And then outside of those operating hours, it's suboptimal, and the chiller's either struggling or you're not providing particularly good conditions, and they do break down. They're very complex to commission. The commissioning, the chiller companies often haven't trained their guys correctly to set these up properly within the New Zealand environment, so they'll approach them maybe not the correct way. And this may not be the case now, but certainly several years ago that was the case. And yes, I have had problems with them, and yes, they are difficult, and they need special commissioning. They need to be correctly sized and selected, and often they only produce the savings for very small periods of the year. So is it a great way to go? I don't know. I think keeping it simple is best personally. There you go. We've got to try and save some energy, but a simple system working well is often more efficient than a complex system not working well. Yeah, that's my view. I'm again happy to have the conversations. Anyone left?
Yes, Rahul.
Rahul, what could be a good starting point to recommissioning an existing 20 to 30-year-old building for energy saving benefits? So talk to somebody who understands commissioning to start with. They'll sit down. The BMS is a good start. The BMS will generally tell you what's working and what's not working. And even if the BMS isn't commissioned correctly and the information that's coming in is wrong, if you're experienced enough, you should be able to pick that up fairly quickly. Looking at the trend logs in certain areas will soon tell you whether the controls are working. If the chiller comes on and the temperature goes up, then clearly something's not right. And yeah, that happens. So have a good look, spend a few days with the building management system if you've got one, and try and identify certainly understand how the systems work, what's there, and then walk around the building, and there's some obvious things that you look for. Economizers on air handling units, dampers, outdoor air dampers sticking open often. So therefore you've got to condition your outdoor air even when you don't want it. Set points being reset. So when you've got scheduled set points in your BMS, so that it, especially a VAV system, and your VAV system is trying to schedule down to the highest cooling demand, so the lowest temperature it needs to provide, and then all your other VAV boxes go into a reheat mode. Often on that system, all the sensors are all input into the calculation. You just need one sensor to be faulty, and it drives that temperature down to its minimum, and everything else is reheating. Very high energy use. So photocopiers, printers, computers, people having heaters under their desks, that sort of thing really affects sensors on the walls. Sensors on external walls, they're picking up the cold from outside. They're actually supposed to be insulated from the wall. They're often just cut into the jib and probably touching the brickwork behind or the blockwork behind. They're being influenced by the outdoor conditions. It will have an impact on the control. So someone who knows what they're doing will pick these up pretty quickly. And as I mentioned before, there's probably 30% savings in energy, very easy, low-hanging fruit. Areas that are running when they don't need to run. Large towers, someone pushes the after-hours switch because he's one person, he's sitting there doing some work, like Jerry, who's often sitting there at night on his own, and he's got the whole building running because he wants to sit there and do some more calculations. Why are you doing it, Jerry? Honestly, think of the energy.
Go home. Go home.
Sorry.
Yeah, but on a question experience on that, hospitals as well, monitoring on. So these nurse core panels will put settings on.
Yeah.
There's actually making quite a bit of heat, 10% of coverage.
Right.
And so you actually get the sensor reading degrees higher than the.
So the air conditioning is blowing out cold air.
Yeah.
Simple things, isn't it? Rubbish in, rubbish out.
What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, it wasn't going into heating mode. So it was like degrees outside.
And it was cold. Yeah, so it's simple. So rubbish in, rubbish out controls. Every part of the system's got to work. One part doesn't work, it will affect the system. So approach it that way. And the deeper you dig, the more you scratch away at the surface, the more things you'll find wrong. But start with the low-hanging fruit, and then depending on how much budget you've got left in terms of paying for your consultants to or your commissioning guys to go around and find things wrong, just keep going till you run out of budget, but you'll see the returns very easily. So Hamza, any project examples of those? I'm not going to tell you, mate. Not here. Over a beer, maybe. Any more questions? It's always my shout.
When was the last time you paid, Hamza?
So we're bang on the 7 o'clock,
Awesome.
gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. So that might be a good time to wrap.
Yeah.
If
Thank you,
there,
Mark. Yeah.
if there's no more questions, I'll just leave it over to you to wrap up then, Rightis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks everybody for turning up online and in person. Much appreciated. Hopefully you've learned something new. I definitely have. Especially every time when Mark presents, it's good. So always new knowledge. Now we will have a couple more presentations coming up in the next few months, as well as I believe there's a couple in from Australia as well. So we'll be posting that on our social network on LinkedIn. So please follow that. We also will share any of the like IEEE or Engineering New Zealand ones as well, as we try to collaborate now a bit more, which will be good. So yeah,
keep an eye on the CIBSE website for other presentations around the world. They're generally still being streamed as well, so you can watch the recordings. So it's a lot of really interesting stuff that's up on the CIBSE website. So have a look on there.
Yeah, awesome. Right. Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, the recordings will be available a little bit later on. If you want to revisit or watch Mark speak again, which is fantastic. Cool. Right. Have a good night, everybody, and you can stop recording there, Roger.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Thank you. Have a good night.